Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Let's Talk About It podcast. Today, let's talk about the Indian farmer protest.
So just a quick preface, we are 16 years old. This is all that we've researched and read, so we apologize if we've missaid anything or gotten things wrong, because this is just what we've researched and what we've understood, and obviously we're not going to understand as well as a professional in this field, and we don't have a professional to interview this time, but we hope that we give some insight into what's happening and say some things that are correct, at least. So, yeah.
So, what are these farmer protests? They are protests that started in November 26th of last year. Because farmers have been protesting on the different borders of the national capital to revoke the three new bills, which are called the Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services, the Farmers' Produce Trade and Commerce, and the Essential Commodities Bill. So the government claims that these new laws are meant to raise farmers' incomes and transform Indian agriculture. They also say it will end excessive regulatory interference and thereby encourage the private sector to invest in storage, transportation, and other parts of the agricultural supply chain. The government claims that these new laws will create uniform legislation across the country. However, farmers don't like it because they're afraid that the new laws will drive down prices and drive the farmers off their lands.
Okay. So, what are these bills? Like, what do they actually mean? Okay. So, the first bill is the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill 2020. So, price assurance will be it's supposed to be in the farmer's interest. So there must be a legal agreement between the firm or business with the farmer when the firm purchases the farmer's products. So it has to be a contract, a legal agreement, and the price that is agreed upon must be paid to the farmers. The price that was agreed upon before must be paid to the farmers. Otherwise, the farmers could be exploited or cheated if the firms change their mind and say, oh, these products aren't up to standard, and when they actually could be, and they can be cheated and exploited through that. So, yeah.
The pros and cons to this bill is that the pros are that the legal agreement is directly made to the farmer and the organization, the business owner or the organization itself, rather than to the agriculture produce market committee. So it's a more direct agreement and it's a more secure agreement. Also, farmers have full control over the quantity expected. However, the owners have full control over the quality of the good produced. Also, this gives legal power and also opportunities for the farmers to be able to claim their legal rights in the committee, because usually legal agreements occur in the agriculture produce market committee and are not directed with the farmers, so they do not have full control over it. The cons of this is that even though that there's a financial contract that binds it, exploitations can occur because the company can easily say that this specific good is not up to the quality that they expect it to and completely cancel the order if it's not written in the financial agreement. But they can cancel the order since they have expected requirements for it. And that does create competition between the farmers and increases productivity. However, this type of exploitation can occur and a lot of resources can be lost. Also, the even though it's an agreement between the business owner and the farmer, the organization can go below the minimum support price that there is in place and further exploit the farmers. So that's the cons, and that's the things that the farmers are mainly worried about.
Also, like, note how when I was talking about it, I said that it was to avoid exploitation and cheating, but it can still happen because there are still ways to work around it. And I think that's also one of the reasons why the protests happened, because yes, it was supposed to stop exploitation and cheating for the farmers on that end, but it can still happen if they don't believe, if they work around the contract and they find loopholes in the contract instead of being faithful and like agreeing and like going by the agreement, they'll find loopholes in it. So moving on to the second bill, the Farming Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill 2020. So this allows for the trading of farm goods outside of the Agricultural Produce Market Committee yard, which is the APMC yard. And I'll let Noor talk about what that is before I continue on about the bill.
The APMC yard is yards in which farmers place small mandis and small little farming markets within the market committee to ensure that they are safeguarded from the exploitation by larger retailers, and it's highly monitored within the committee. So basically that's what it is. It's a board which protects the farmers whilst ensuring that they get the proper amount of land and the proper amount of support price to fulfill their needs.
Yeah, so when you can trade outside of it, this creates barrier-free trade. So the free market is introduced. So the farmer's income will depend on the volatility of the market and on things like that. And there will be no government intervention because they can trade outside of the APMC yard. So yeah, creates free trade.
Pros and cons to this is mainly the positives are obviously the barrier-free trade and moving to a more free market. It's economically like a really productive move. How it also promotes competition within, because they have more ground on controlling which goods go to which area, which place has the most demand for this certain good, which definitely creates competition. However, during the time of the pandemic, removing the government's support to the farmers during a pandemic is a shift that they were already scared because the pandemic already removed already affected the market a lot in the financial sense. So right now, taking that away, so basically no government intervention within the communities basically means is that the government is not going to provide protection. At least it's not written in the bill that they will provide protection, that the farmers will have to fend for themselves for getting the specific requirements needed. And the issue with that is that at the moment they're currently struggling, and move away from the fact that it's economically like a good thing to like present day reality where it's like they're already struggling, and putting them in a situation where they will further possibly struggle is not the smartest move at the current moment, in my personal opinion. However, I do see how this can benefit larger farmers, since they have more room and more like audiences they can sell their goods to. However, this will be extremely detrimental to smaller farmers. Also, this affects major states like Haryana, which basically the main income of that state is the agricultural revenue that they get. And moving away from the APMC yards could definitely cause Haryana to be in financial stress. However, a solution to that could possibly be that they could like increase the surface area of the APMC yards and like increase it into like further states by partnering with other states. However, that's just my personal take on it. But yeah, overall, that's that.
So the third bill is the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill. So 2020. So this is not new, but it is amended from the previous Essential Commodities Bill. So the previous Essential Commodities Bill was created to control production, supply, and distribution of essential commodities. And so these essential commodities were a bunch of products or commodities on a list that were placed there so that they could so that the production, supply, and distribution could be easier. So the amendment of this was to remove some of these commodities, some of the commodities already listed, and these commodities were cereals, pulses, oilseed, edible oils, onions, and potatoes. So this means that the prices will rise for these commodities that were removed, and they can only be added if the situation requires it. And this stops artificial demand, which is when the producers cut down the supply, they lower the amount they're producing, and which creates more demand. And according to the law of demand, which is when demand rises, price falls. So the price increases because it's artificial, and producers get more money and profits. And the government will only regulate, they will only come into the picture and intervene when there is war, famine, high price rise, or natural calamities like hurricanes or tornadoes or floods. So those are the only situations when those commodities are removed, the potatoes, onions, etc., will be re-added to the list when it's needed. So
the pros to this is that so there was a recent thing going on basically where some farmers or like some retailers would essentially hoard goods and would sell them at a higher price, goods that were in a lot of demand, but they were extremely like scarce in the regular market because a certain retailer was hoarding it. So what they did essentially was to avoid that, they regulated the price. Not they regulated which goods which goods. Oh my God, I can't speak. Which goods which goods are essential commodities and which goods are not. So for example, onions. There's a greater demand for onions, especially during the pandemic. Everyone's making like some type of onion required dish, or I don't know. But like, so basically what they did was that they basically made a list and they were like, onions go on this list and the prices will not like increase by this number because it's in a greater demand and people need it a lot, rather than it being in this other list where it's at its normal price point and people cannot afford it, yet it's basically in excess and people cannot afford it. because they do not have enough money to support it. So like regulating that, in a sense, making it easier for the people, for the community to get it. Yeah. And one of the cons to this is that it removes certain essential goods as commodities that might not, like, it might, like, as we all say, like, you can't like make everyone happy in society, right? So by removing certain essential goods, people would be like, why did they remove that, and why did they replace it with that? Because this has no use to them, but the other thing has more use to them, but that just goes away. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay, so now that you've heard about like the bills and stuff, I'm going to talk about who is like showing support for these bills. So I don't know if this was mentioned, but these protests have 250 million Indian farmers behind them, and farmers actually make up 52% of the labor force in India. So obviously they're like really like there's like a importance to them in society, right? So what political parties in India have expressed support? I preface this by saying I'm sorry about my pronunciation for some of these political parties, okay? But okay, so there are a couple of them. So the first one is the Indian National Congress. I'm pretty sure this is the oldest political party in India, although I could be mistaken. Yeah, it's the oldest political party in India. It was actually once led by Gandhi. Fun fact, that's a little fun fact for you. But they've expressed support for the farmers' protests. There's also, okay, the second party is the Shiromani Akali Dal party, which is a center-right Sikh centric state political party in Punjab, India. There is the Admi Party, which is center left, the Communist Party of India, and the Marxist Communist Party of India, which is a far left political party. The Rashtriya Loktantrik Party, which is the Indian political party in the states of Rajasthan. Am I pronouncing that properly? Okay. And then finally, I was getting through this. And then finally, there's the Shiv Sena political party, which is a right-wing and ultra-nationalistic political party in India. The international response also has been kind of varied from country to country and from like international organizations. So countries like Canada and Australia, the progressive parties in there, so like the labor parties, have all expressed support for the protests and have also expressed concern for how India is mishandling the protests. Italy's Indian ambassador, so the Indian ambassador to Italy, actually expressed support for the farm bills. New Zealand had protests in Auckland, so Indian New Zealanders, gathered in the capital of the capital of New Zealand, and protested. Pakistan called the government's behavior against the Punjabi farmers shameful. Like, those were their exact words. They called it shameful. The UK's Labour members of parliament expressed support towards the protests and again concern for the government's handling of the protest. The United States, there were actually several Indian American protests that were held in support of the farmers, and they were being held outside Indian consulates in several states in the United States. For international organizations, the UN called on the Indian government to allow the protests and was affirming their right to voice their opposition to the government, stating, and these were like their exact words, people have a right to demonstrate peacefully and the authorities need to let them to do so, which was in response to how the authorities were treating or mishandling the protesters. The IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, said that the agricultural reforms have the potential to represent a significant step forward for agricultural reform in India. Spokesperson for the IMF contended that the bills will eventually reduce middlemen and improve efficiency. So he expressed massive support towards the protest. Towards the farm bills. And the Human Rights Watch issued a statement on the 2nd of February, calling on the Indian government to drop baseless criminal charges against journalists who were covering the protests. So the response from different parties in India and parties around the world have been quite varied depending on their ideology.
So Dua mentioned a little bit about, or touched upon, the India's how they handled the protest. So I want to kind of elaborate more on that and what really happened during those protests. So the Indian farmers showed opposition by blocking roads into the capital as a sign of like civil disobedience. The protests turned violent a couple weeks after this when protesters drove tractors into the heart of the capital, which is New Delhi. So the police responded to this by shooting tear gas into like the people and around where people are. So the Prime Minister Modi said that, I'm sorry if I said that really white, said that he will not change his mind on the new laws. However, he can delay them for 18 months, which is, I heard somewhere that the farmers just think he's like delaying the inevitable, which farmers are still not really okay with, obviously. So the protesters said that they will continue the protest until the laws have been repealed. They even spent nights in the tents on highways during cold winter months, and they brought things like tractors in with water for cooking, cleaning, and bathing. They set up kitchens where people cook. Markets were formed. People started like selling things to each other or just cooking for others, etc., etc. So
Yeah, I was watching Trevor Noah's YouTube video about this, and I remember him talking about like how they were going to delay it for 18 months, was it? Right? Yeah. So, and he was like, it's just going to keep happening. Like history is just going to repeat itself. If there's nothing changing, then the farmers will stay there. And even if they stop protesting for a bit and then the bill happens, then they're just going to come back and it's just going to start all over again. So, yeah, there's no point really, like how Dan was saying, is delaying the inevitable. There's no point in pushing it back if it's still going to happen, you know? So it's not going to solve anything by delaying it. It's not going to change the farmers' minds.
I would also like to give a little shout out. I'm sure she doesn't need a shout out, but Rihanna, I would like to give her a really big shout out right now for spreading the word about the farmers' protests she basically posted a tweet and she said, "Why are we not talking about this?" And I would like to thank Greta Thunberg for hopping on immediately, and Amanda Cerny and many other influencers that came out for support, because it raised immense amount of awareness that even if the bills do not change, at least we know that we made an impact and that we tried everything we could to initially help the farmers in any way we can. So that's the most we can do, and we should keep doing it.
So, since we have an Indian among us, a beautiful, talented little young lady, so do you, Noor, want to touch upon anything, say any of your personal opinions, preface this as personal opinions about this topic, how, like, if you've seen it affecting people firsthand, if you've heard anything from your family?
I've seen videos of the protests that are going on, and I've seen tear gas, and I've seen I have not personally been through it, but I've second-handedly seen it. And personally, I do not think that you should resort to violence for anything. However, everyone has their own way, since India like promotes free speech, this is basically what they're trying to do in a sense. They're trying to voice their own opinions, and I feel like they should let them. And just the resorting to violence and putting extreme measures in and further hurting is not gonna mend the situation. It's gonna further worsen it, and it's gonna cause further rage instead of creating, I guess, peace, which is our main goal at this point. So I feel for the farmers because some of them will not go home to their families. Some of them will fight. Most of them are, sorry, they're fighting at the moment, and most of them will not have a chance to go back home, but at least they did it for the better goods, or like to better the future of their families, I guess, to secure a position in society. And I respect them so much for it because they truly are heroes in this sense. That's my take on it. And I do understand the government place and why they feel the need to put these laws in. However, the laws could be mended within accepting the farmers' concerns and coming to a middle ground rather than staying one-sided only. So if the bills were to be implemented, I just hope that the farmers do get their ways in it. So initially it benefits them. So it should overall be good for them, and they should like agree with it as much. Yeah. As the other person said. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you so much, Noor. I just want to remind you guys that links, when this video is uploaded, links will be in the description on where you can learn more about it, where you can help, donate, links to the websites or videos we got our information from. So thank you very much for listening to this. Thank you, everyone else, my co-hosts, for all the research that you did and all the beautiful words you said. So yeah. Thank you and see you next time. See you next podcast.